And I think that is the most underrated breathing technique is the sigh, because it's the body's natural way to release the tension in the body. It builds up and then the body goes, ah, and that is the pressure release valve. Well, guess what? You can consciously do that technique and it will literally change your entire state.
Welcome to The Whole View. I'm Stacy Toth of Real Everything, and I'm here each week to dive deeper into how we can find happiness and health inside and out through self-love, body positivity, and discovering new ways to be our best selves. Before we get started, a reminder that this podcast is for general educational purposes and is not intended to diagnose, advise, or treat any physical or mental illness, and we always recommend that you see a licensed health professional accordingly. I do want to welcome to the show this week, Kurtis Lee Thomas. Welcome to The Whole View.
All right, Stacy, thank you for having me.
A renowned corporate mindfulness trainer who has introduced mindfulness practices to Ivy League colleagues and top Fortune 500 companies such as Nike, not to mention NASA. He is the chair of the Just Breathe Foundation, collaborating with top brands and celebrities to tackle today's mental health challenges affecting communities and workplaces. And he teaches the breathwork detox. You can find his work at breathworkdetox.com. And it was featured on the Today Show, as well as voted #1 for employee well-being by HR Magazine. Incorporates both in ancient wisdom with modern science. I'm excited to talk about that a bit today. I think that is the heart of where my health journey has taken me as well. So more importantly, though, you are a dad to a super smart and adorable fur son I want to kidnap and might have stalked a little bit on your social media. Can you tell us more about Zeus?
That's my boy. Yeah, Zeus is my dog. He's an American bully, also known as Pit Bull. And man, he's my best friend, literally. And yeah, I had him for about 3.5 years.
In this house, we love a chonky dog. So our dog we have 2 family dogs, and the first one that we got, she is so high maintenance and she won't eat anything. And she's just a very petite, prim little proper girl. And you pick her up and she feels like a paper napkin. I don't know. She's 15 pounds. But then we got a French bulldog. So I very much love bullies, bulldogs in general, like all the kind of chunky dogs. So I see Zeus online. I'm just like, I just need to like rub his belly. I just love a dog. So anyway, I bring him up because pets in general, really, even reptiles and bunnies and all kinds of pets have been shown scientifically to help calm our nervous system, which really relates to the work that you do. Have you found that bringing Zeus into your life has helped some of that mindfulness work or breath work or like building some of that attachment to understanding what other people might need or how they might connect to the work that you do, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I actually had a conversation with Zeus just a couple of days ago.
Since you were
And
chatting.
I was just looking at him and I was just looking at my life and how things have changed. And my daughter, she's now a senior in high school. And right around when I got him, she got her driver's license. And she was my best friend. And I'd pick her up from school, drop her off, bring her to cheerleading, drop her off from cheerleading, bring her to work, all these things. And then when she got her car, it's like, I lost my best friend. And I was like, all of a sudden I had more time on my hands, but and then I had Zeus and I didn't realize like he filled that void of my daughter becoming older and he became my buddy. And I was like, wow, like you really came in at the perfect timing. And I literally was just talking to him, thanking him. So it's funny you bring that up. So absolutely. He's a service dog. I got all the papers, but he is not a dog I could take on an airplane or bring anywhere. He's so calm when he's with me. And the moment he sees a human, I don't know, he must have been a human in a past life instead of the opposite way around. He goes crazy. He just loves people so much. So he really just doesn't know how to act.
He's so well behaved in terms of tricks and stuff. I can't believe that my French bulldog does not know how to behave either, but he learned from our first dog that like welcoming someone at the door means absolutely losing your mind
Yeah.
welcoming them at the door, which mine is twice as big as our first dog, and yours is twice as big as my Frenchie, so I imagine that is a overwhelming welcome for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also interesting because he looks like you. Like, he's a light-skinned pet with bright eyes, and he really exemplifies this idea that, like, owners look like their pets sometimes, right? And for me, it really struck me also because one of the first things that I noticed when your media kit crossed my desk was you are a person of color in the wellness space, and in a part of the wellness space that is specifically exclusionary, I think. It is rooted in racism, a lot of the toxic wellness kind of stuff, so to speak. We're talking about mindfulness, we're talking about things that are rooted in science, and we'll get there. But there's also the other side of that coin where there's a lot of snake oil salesman type things that can happen in that space. And I know we've only just met, but I'm going to break down the barriers because I think it's really a conversation important and worth having in the health and wellness space for listeners to also understand where your lived experience would be as we talk about a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. And I'm curious what that journey has been like for you being a leader in the community, in this space, how it's shown up for you in both, I'm sure, some positive ways, right? Like you have great connections with Nike. You're wearing a Nike hat today. You work with them, but also inevitably, it struck me immediately like that can't have been all good either.
Well, man, it's a loaded kind of
It
question.
totally is.
But because I'm thinking like childhood, because I think I have a unique look because I'm light skinned, but my father's black, but he's also got Cape Verdean Native American. And my mom's blonde hair, blue eyes. And luckily for me, I got her blue eyes. And my daughter's so mad at me. She did not get my blue eyes. She tells me all the time. So I've seen a lot. Like I've actually had colored friends and I had white friends and I've seen them be racist and them not even knowing what I am. So I get to listen to things behind the curtain and like, and then it's this like people don't I'm white and like other people don't I'm black. So I'm very much neutral in all of this. But I will say this: that on my journey with this mindfulness, it really started with a spiritual awakening. And in the spiritual awakening, I was learning from old school OGs like Carolyn Mice and Doreen Virtue and Wayne Dyer, and who's passed away. And I remember going to these events, and I go to these events, and it'd be mostly all Caucasian, all baby boomers, right? Whatever, 50s and 60s, and then all females. And females typically have more higher emotional intelligence. They'll awaken before men. So I stuck out like a sore thumb. People are like, who the heck is this guy? I was young in my 20s and looking the way that I did. But I just accepted being different. And I think the where I'm at now, it's actually more beneficial because I'm able to work with different groups and different people and all different walks of life. And whether it's a boardroom at Nike or going to prison systems and working with them or NFL players and working with men and women, and that is my goal. My goal and mission is to help as many people as I can. And I believe I'm here for the masses, not any one specific demographic.
Yeah, I love that you said that because first of all, we can't have everybody look the same because then it's not accessible to everybody. But also that the fluidity of your personal journey, whether it be childhood or whatever, led you to feel a connection to helping so many different kinds of people. And it's interesting. One of the things that I've heard multiple times is like underprivileged and marginalized folk oftentimes don't have the same kind of complaints about, let's say, autoimmune disease manifests very differently in middle-aged white women than it does in other demographics. And part of that is the privilege of being tapped into our health and this kind of stuff. Part of it is the stress and the burden that comes with that. But then there's also the idea of like, does someone have access to this information? And mindfulness for me really ties into my autoimmune disease and my health journey because it wasn't until I really understood the stress that I was like putting myself on and that kind of stuff that I was able to get a better management of how I was really holding everything in, which was causing physical problems to happen. I don't know how familiar you are with like ACE traumas and stuff like that, but we've talked about that on the show. And so it's why my mind goes to this place immediately of a breath of fresh air with not just being like someone looking the same. And it took bravery for you to like be in a room of people that didn't look like you. And now you get to welcome other people into that fold. And I hope that you experienced welcomeness in those spaces as well. I won't force you to talk about things you don't want to talk about, but I think that the more that we can be aware as individuals, myself, listeners, everybody, the people that you work with, to be aware that we might be in a space where either we're different than other people or someone else is different than us, and making sure that people are included rather than feeling excluded will allow some more growth in all of these areas for so many different people. So I did speak to science as being forefront for you, not just the modern science with ancient wisdom, but also you've worked with NASA. I would love if we could maybe lay some groundwork for those who doubt that mindfulness and breath work are within the scientific community, especially as it relates to you're working. So, for example, you're working with NASA, which is arguably one of the most scientific organizations in the States, at the very least. How do you tie this idea of mindfulness and breath work into being scientific, being real, right?
Yeah.
And not just
Yeah. So that's the thing is also when you want to talk to the masses, you have to meet people where they're at. And different people and organizations have different levels of collective consciousness within those groups. And then also, some are more left brained and some are more right brained. So if I'm working with a Hollywood production company, these people are more creative. They're more right brained. Even like company like Nike, a little bit more outside of the box thinkers. They're a little bit more right brained. But when you're working with a company like NASA and rocket scientists, literally, it's all left brain type people. So I talk to these organizations very differently. And obviously, with NASA, I'm going in with more science and more facts. So for that particular one, because I did really want that account, how I was able to get them to try my modality is I brought in a world renowned psychotherapist from UCLA, Dr. Helen Levetsky, and I brought in one of my buddies who's a neuroscientist, Dr. Jack Feldman from UCLA as well. And the psychotherapist and the neuroscientist and myself, we did the breathwork for them. And then we entered into a panel with a rocket scientist and all these people. And then we talked about it. And they were so blown away. NASA actually put on record, I believe in Bloomberg, they said that this was a game changer for their wellness program. And it was the only modality that elicited the most positive results. Now, results oriented, that's what drives NASA. So that was a big win and a notch under my belt when I was able to work with them and get that feedback. Because then now I can work with any organization in conclusion with people like Nike, which was not more fun, but more my vibe. I'm definitely not the person, although I can go deep into the occult and metaphysics and in that world. I know it very well, but it's not good when you're looking to communicate things that are quantifiable.
what do you think some of the top takeaways or connections were when you were with NASA that allowed them to feel those game-changing moments? Like,
Yeah.
were there statistics or facts or information that were shared that might be helpful for listeners who might be in the same kind of doubtful place?
Yeah. Well, we did a whole case study on it. They can go on my website and look at the case study with both of them. And I think the reaction is what I enjoyed the most. And that's these people going in super skeptical, right? Like, who's this guy? What is this stupid technique? All right, I'm here. I get to get out of work for an hour. Let's see what it's about. And then seeing them after, they were like, oh my God, I didn't know that was possible. Oh, I got to do my research. And it was so cool. Very similar to the Capital Group. So they manage 2.3 trillion with the T assets under management and very much left brain. Those are probably the two most left brain companies I ever worked with. And after the event, they come in a certain way. And then afterwards, they're all mind blown. And then they're in lines to like, just talk to me and just to connect. And that's the part I love. And then there was this really tall guy who was sitting in line. He was third in line. comes up to me and he goes, puts out his hand. He goes, I just need to shake your hand. And he goes, I was one of the people who wasn't going to bring you here today. And I just have to tell you, you made me a believer. Well, come to find out, it's the chairman of the company. And then this is a funny one. The guy next to him, he was some C-level executive, and he comes up to me and he's like, and people can't see what I'm doing, maybe if it's video, but audio. And he's like, open his mouth, goes to talk, and then he's like, and then he goes to think, and he's literally trying to formulate his words of his experience. And then he just grabs me and hugs me. And he's like, that's all I gotta say. And he walked away. So I think the fact that breath work is so unassuming. You're breathing, you're doing it every day. How is this going to change your life? That's like me saying, Stacy, let's go on this walk. And on this walk, your life's going to be changed. You're like, yeah, right. We just go on a walk. But when I tell people come to this breathing event, it's going to change your life. And then it actually does, right? Seeing the reactions, because people have different reactions. Some people have landslide healings and clearings. Some people experience tremendous clarity. And I think that's the reason why I do breath work every single day. And there's so many different reactions that people have. And it's different for everybody because breathwork is different depending on where you're at in life, how much you're holding on to, and how much you're willing to let go of.
I think that I was in corporate America many years ago, and I'm thinking of different experiences that I've had of people that were brought in or different like wellness type things. And I remember a couple of years ago, actually, I did a not as corporate, like an affiliate type model company, bringing in ambassadors, people that work for their company. And we did like a perfect breath type thing. And it was interesting just in that type of exercise, which is different than the specific program that you have. But even just in trying to achieve optimized breathing and the way that the oxygenation clearly was impacting some of the people in the room, I remember having moments where people were like, wow, I can't believe how helpful just like doing some breathing is. And it takes me back to also like the past couple of years as a foster mom of traumatized teenagers. And also I have an autistic son, and working with them and like putting my hands on his shoulders and saying, okay, we're going to take 3 deep breaths and then we're going to like come back to this moment. And the impact that just simple daily breathing can bring to stressful moments or being triggered, different kinds of things. Can you talk a little bit about the mechanism, like of some of those health benefits of why, for example, breath work is so impactful? Like yes, there might be clarity in different kinds of things, but there's also like a very, as a left brain science oriented person, right? Like there's legitimate health impacts to breath work.
Yeah. So there's parts of breathwork which is like biohacking, right? To get to the next level. It's almost like a cheat code, which I can tell you more about that. And then there's the healing benefits of it. And how I even got into breathwork was I had a rare stomach condition, and I call it rare because the doctors couldn't even diagnose me, never mind heal me. I was spending tens of thousands of dollars in co-payments. The best doctors from New York to LA, I would travel wherever. And I was suffering. I lost 40 pounds. I thought I was dying. And after doing every test under the sun, endoscopies, colonoscopies, they have cameras that you can swallow and it goes in your intestines. I swallowed like 2 of them, not at the same time, but at different times because I'd be like, no, this is wrong. You got to do it again. It was so bad, just to paint the picture. I checked myself into LA hospital, and this was my second time there. And I said, cut me open. I'm going to opt into surgery. I'll sign the waiver, go inside. You need to tell me what is going on in there, because I'm sick of people telling me that nothing's there and I'm fine. I actually wanted someone to come and be like, Kurtis, you got stage 3. And I'd be like, yes, finally. Like I know what I have. And thank God they didn't cut me open, because it wasn't shortly after I found this ancient breathing technique that is resurfacing now, which is why I'm in the path that I'm in. And I did one session and it completely eradicated my stomach condition and I healed my stomach. And that happened in one night, in one session. And I'm a Capricorn. I'm very analytical, very logical, very skeptical person. Like I got to see it to believe it, all
You
of
can't
this.
say I'm a Capricorn and then say I'm a very analytical person because not everybody listening to the show even believes in like astrological signs. So I'm just gonna like
Maybe.
call that out.
Maybe. Well, they did studies. I think it was like 84% of women actually believe in
Yeah.
astrology. And if you look at people like JP Morgan, right? They asked him because they heard he uses astrology. And they're like, what does this we hear you use astrology? And he's like, millionaires don't use astrology. Billionaires do. And you can actually track a lot of the wars and a lot of power moves that are made up top, and a lot of the presidents, former presidents who are known to use astrology. And if you look at the moon, it has the power to pull the tides. And if you look at our bodies, we are made up of mostly what? 76% water. So these planets and these moons, they do affect our emotions in different ways. So not to go down an astrology
No,
rabbit hole.
listen, I've had an astrology show. I actually two astrology shows, one with a celebrity astrologer and one with a scientist debunking it. And I think I fall in where a lot of people fall in, which is there is something to this. And I'm not sure what, I'm not entirely bought in, but I'm 100% sure that there are more births and more hospital accidents on full moons. And there's a reason for that. I'm just going to leave it there.
I love it. I love it. Now I forgot where I was going with this. We got astrology.
Logical. Yeah, sorry, I derailed you. You're a logical person.
A logical person. I could not wrap my brain around how a breathing technique was able to heal a condition that the best doctors couldn't tell me what was wrong with me. I didn't understand that. And what I realized is that the reason why these doctors couldn't tell me what was wrong with me is because my issue wasn't physical. It was emotional, right? It was energetic. And I think that is where there's a big disconnect between Eastern and Western medicine. Now, I've been to India, I've been to the Himalayas, I'm going to Tibet in a couple of weeks. So I know that culture, and I very much know the culture that I grew up in. I am not you get this horrible disease and eat this leaf and you're going to be better. If I get a tooth cavity or I break an arm, you better give me that Novocaine. You better give me that painkiller. I am not swifting towards any one way or another. I think the future is when these two come together, because some people will say that this breathwork detox modality is an alternative modality. I would argue that this modality is actually an original modality and everything else is alternative. And that's the business of the pharmaceuticals. And you can't patent anything that's natural or in nature. So you have to recreate it. And that's why they have all these, different chemicals and they patent their pills and whatever. I got you. Cool. Yeah, if I need it, I'm going to want it. So I'm not knocking you. We're on the same team, hopefully. So, but what I realized is that energy is real and emotions are real. And although I was already certified as a certified life coach, hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, sports science fitness professional, Reiki master, all these certifications, and I've had many experiences in ayahuasca. I've been around the block. I tried a lot of things. And the fact that the breath, it literally was right under my nose the entire time. And that's what did it for me. I had to open my eyes up because in health school, they didn't teach us how to clear emotions. They didn't teach us how to let go of trauma. They didn't teach us those things. They taught us about push-ups and venereal diseases, but not the things that matter of healing ourselves emotionally. And I had a lot of trauma when I was younger that I didn't realize I was even holding on to until I let it go. And at that moment, in that first breathwork session I did, I cried like a baby, but I wasn't the only one. There was a whole room full of people crying, and I didn't understand how this was doing that. And I later found out, and it's science mixed with woo-woo. I can get into that, but I'm trying to stay away from the woo-woo with you.
Listen, we like to bridge both worlds. We're here. I'm here for it.
Okay.
I was just calling you out because it was a ironic statement that you made.
Yeah. So like, what is emotions, right? Emotions is energy in motion. And when that energy is not in motion and that emotion gets stuck in our body, right? It's there. And what happens is we need to sometimes redefine our definition of pain and trauma, meaning what I experienced to be traumatic today might be different when I was 5 or 6 years old. Maybe getting pushed off the swing or bullied or not picked in dodgeball is traumatic as a kid. So what happens is we don't have the emotional intelligence as children to process these traumas and these things that happen to us. And when we get older, that's when we're able to. But the thing is, the mind always wants to think into the future. The soul does want to be present, but the body holds on to the past. The body is a living library for all the experience that we had, and the body does keep score. So there's a thing that happens to us is the reason why we don't process these emotions is because the thing that happens to us is called life. And more things happen to us, more breakups. We got cheated on, our business partner stole from us, whatever, so many different things. And then all of a sudden our trauma begins to compound. And that's when we run into issues like I had, anxiety, panic attacks. I won't say depression because I think it's a clinical term, but I'll say chronic sadness. And I dealt with all this stuff. It's because I didn't hit the pressure release valve. I didn't clear all the things that was going on in my body energetically that doctors couldn't see. And then now they're starting to get it, not there yet, but I know Harvard did a study and they said 60 to 90% of all doctor's visits is stress related. And that is a crazy number. If you're looking at the average, 80% of all doctor's visits are stress related. Shouldn't we be treating stress? That should be it. US corporations spend $300 billion a year on missed work days and events directly related to stress. So what I'm doing is focusing on stress. And there's an amazing thing that happens when you do. So including losing weight. And I'll explain that and I'll share some science with you. So I created a program called Breathwork Bootcamp and people did breathwork for 30 days. And the whole purpose was to feel better. Like people feel euphoria after doing breathwork. And it's really because they got rid of all that stress. And what I realized, people started sending me photographs of their waistline. I'm like, why are people losing weight? And why are they sending this to me? Dozens. And then I was like, okay, I need to do some research here and find out what's going on. And what I found out was amazing. I still barely believe it, but you guys, it's all Googleable. So this is a fact. That's stress. When we're stressed, the adrenals release cortisol. Cortisol is what makes us crave sugary foods, which makes us gain weight. So when the breath work drastically reduces the stress and the cortisol, now all of a sudden you're not craving these foods. So people are actually wanting to eat healthy instead of being like, do this regimen and don't eat this, don't eat this. So when you do this deep diaphragmatic breathing technique, this is the reason why people were experiencing weight loss. They were cutting down on their stress, cutting down on the cortisol, not craving foods. They were detoxing their system physically and energetically, and it was causing them to lose weight. Wasn't my intention at all. My intention was for them to feel better and to feel those endorphins and those dopamine again. So I'm continuously learning about breath as people experience even in more benefits than I anticipated.
I think that this is really interesting, and I'm really not trying to be difficult. So on the show, we work really hard to not get sucked into diet culture, which is a judgmental sort of approach of life that can give people a lot of shame and guilt about things that actually aren't impacting health the way that the science supports. Oftentimes it's more cultural than it is scientific. And what I think is really interesting about what you're talking about is that it gets to the root of why diet culture is such a problem, right? It's trying to sell you on buying certain things and behaving in a certain way to minimize yourself, make yourself smaller, versus tapping into what I'm hearing you say, your authentic self, to not necessarily even to have subscribed to any sort of belief about what you need to be doing with your body, but rather to get in touch with your inside self and to listen to yourself, which is really hard to do when you have the voices from social media and TV and magazines and Hollywood and medical bias and all of these kinds of things creeping in. That instead, when you're able to quiet the noise and do the breath work, that homeostasis of what your body wants to be doing is easier to achieve, rather than like, okay, I'm going to do this breath work to lose 12 pounds is entirely different than like, I'm going to do this because it is good for me in a multitude of different ways. And that may lead to this result and it may not lead to that result. And either way, I'm improving my emotional and physical health by doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the thing. It wasn't even about it's actually saying, forget about all the gimmicks. We actually have this innate ability of the greatest technology in our bodies. It's right here. It's the only system in the body that's autonomic. You can do it consciously. It also works on its own. It's the only system that does that. And what I learned from me, which has nothing to do with weight, but sometimes the weight that we need to lose isn't on our physical body. right? And emotional baggage is a real thing. And if that was the case, I was carrying so much that I didn't know. And sometimes it's not the weight of the baggage, but it's how you carry it. And I grew up with a single mother, right? My mom had tremendous emotional baggage because she always had to be strong for me. It takes a lot for a single mother to raise a man, from a child to a man. And she couldn't show herself being soft to me. At least she thought that was the case. So she constantly let all these issues in her life compound, and to be strong and to be a single mother and to go to work and to go to college. And like she just did so much. So I watched her do it, and I actually watched myself do it. And I realized that we have we just some people don't have the tools. And when I found that this tool works on detoxing us physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, it was something that I wanted to bring to the people because it was something that moved the needle. And I'm into mindfulness, so of course I do yoga and meditation, but unlike yoga and meditation, the results of breath work are immediate and undeniable from one session. We don't have time. We all get the same time in the day, but I feel like everyone's more busier than we are now. And there's so much noise. Buy this diet pill, do this, buy this program. It's going to change your life, right? We can't focus on all of these things and all these supplements. We should only focus on the things that actually work for us and the things that move the needle in our life, the things that produce us results and the ones that make us feel good. And I think that's different for everybody. But considering that I dedicated my life to having these experiences, whether it was through pleasure or pain, seeking out solutions, I found something. And I like to call myself a recovering serial entrepreneur. I was the kid that always had like a pager business and all this stuff. And I love the business. And when I found this modality, I actually had to have a sit down with myself. And I was like, you know what? Nothing else matters than being able to help people and to make an impact in this world. And I literally exited I had an alcohol company with the former CEO Bacardi. I had all these cool other companies. I exited every single thing I was doing. And I said, I'm going to focus on purpose and mission and getting this out to the world. And that was a big pivotal moment for me when I realized it's not about money, it's about purpose.
Love that you found your purpose and your mission. If listeners are like, okay, but how do I know if I want to do this breathwork detox with you? I don't even, listeners, I haven't done it. I don't know. I can't advise you. Okay, but I'm hearing what you're saying. What do you think where could someone go to learn more or steps to take? Is there an entry point for events that you host that someone could listen and learn about what this longer commitment would be? What does that look like?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'll say that if you just go on Google and conscious breathing, even if you just make conscious breathing a part of your life, it doesn't have to be with me. I'm not even here to convince you or sell you anything. What I would like to take away from this is I'd like to have gotten you curious, right? If I got the audience curious, then that's a win for me because curiosity didn't kill the cat, ignorance did. And I'd like to think that curiosity is consciousness at work. And all the great things that's happened in my life have started from a spark of curiosity that led me to researching this and reading that book or whatever it may be. So hopefully I got them curious. So you can go to anybody, conscious breathing, but if they're interested in the technique that I teach, which I took all of those other skill sets and certifications and I coupled them into the one vehicle out of all of them that could house all of the rest, and they get all of those into one is breathwork detox. So it was created to be the most powerful and cathartic breathing technique that does all these things that we spoke about. If they're interested in that particular one, then they can go to breathworkdetox.com. And when they go to breathworkdetox.com, they click on a virtual event. I do these virtual events twice a month. So every 2 weeks, people log in from all over the world and they go through the exact experience that I'm talking about. And if they want to try it, I did create a coupon code. They get 50% off. So it's podcast 50. So if anyone is interested in that, they can write down podcast 50 and they can put that in. And I would say that would be my intention.
I like the idea too that they can incorporate it into everyday lives because, like I said, I haven't taken this course, but I have found that even just conscious breathing or being aware of how your physical body is changing. Breath is one of the first things that you can point to or be aware of, right? Like muscle tension, breath work, all of these things happen when we're stressed, we're triggered, we're overwhelmed. And I think for people's everyday lives, whether it's like you're driving in the car and your kids are screaming in the back, or your boss comes in and expects you to do the impossible. And by the way, he fired someone else and you're going to take on all their responsibilities. And you're like,
Which happens
oh
a
my
lot.
God. Exactly. Right. Like, no matter what that is, I think when you learn to have a moment to process and not be the person that, like, tells someone else, "Oh, just calm down," right? That's worse than
Yeah.
like, owning your own and being able to feel when those things are getting out of control, and I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older or, like, if I'm learning more things, I've had more lived experience, but I think the more that this goes on and the more that I can in those moments, like, literally take a couple of deep breaths, I'm literally a different person on the other side of that 30, 60 seconds. And I
Yeah.
think that's a huge thing for someone to be able to do.
Yeah. So I'd add to that to give you something that I found extremely helpful. It's actually the basis of the detox. Is that when people take those conscious 3 breaths, first of all, the conscious part of it is the part of it because we're breathing every day, right? So how's it going to change? It's the conscious part of it, but that's focusing on the inhale. But if we can also focus on the exhale, meaning if you look at the body, which is the most sophisticated biomechanical machine, when the body feels the most stress, anxiety, tension, or even pain, what it does naturally. Look at what it does naturally, right? So it'll build up, then I'll do this. It's called a sigh of relief. And I think that is the most underrated breathing technique is the sigh because it's the body's natural way to release the tension in the body. It builds up and then the body goes, ah, and that is the pressure release valve. Well, guess what? You can consciously do that technique and it will literally change your entire state. If you do 3 sighs, and when I say let out the exhale, let it out like loud and obnoxiously, let out the exhale, like, and just 3 of those. And I love doing that with children, right? Because I'm like, everybody needs to know this. A lot of my, trauma comes from being a child. And part of my mission was like, okay, I'm working with adults, but like, how do I work with kids? And that's what made me to create the Just Breathe Foundation. And I actually took the time to write a children's book and bring this into the schools and teach them how to do it. And I love teaching them the straw breathing technique, which is the one that actually helped with my panic attacks, and the sigh because it's simple. They get it. And immediately after they do it, they're like, wow, I feel so good. I didn't know I could feel this good. And just seeing like kids like know that they have those tools, I'm like, man, I feel like I feel good. I feel like I'm doing the right thing.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you about the foundation. And in my research, which, borderline stalking a little bit, you have a TV clip of being in schools. And I think you were giving an interview and you said, once a mind is stretched, it can never go back to its original dimensions. And so I think the intention, the context of the conversation was around helping children learn these techniques at an earlier age, helping build in a foundation, so to speak, and then enables this better processing, better growth, better journey, avoidance of some of the autoimmune disease, stomach problems, some of the things that we've talked about into adulthood, but also not having to wait till you get older to realize, oh, I'm so stressed out by all these things, right? Can you talk a little bit more about the work that you're doing with children? And like, there are a lot of parents that listen, grandparents that listen. Let's say we have someone who is just a small thing in our lives, whatever that is, right? How are we able to, as the caretakers in their life, support this for them the way that you're going in and teaching these kids, like, we want to do that for our children. How do we do that?
Well, I think stress and anxiety is a real thing for kids, but guess what? a kid isn't going to go to their parents and say, I feel stress and anxiety, right? They're just not going to feel good about themselves. And if they don't know these things exist, then they're going to think that's natural and it's normal to feel like that. And if we give them tools to be like, okay, you feel like that right now? Okay, yeah, acknowledge that. What does that feel like? Right? Where in your body do you feel that? And you'll hear them say, it's like right here in their solar plexus, or it's in my belly, right? And they'll say all these parts of their body. Okay, can you close your eyes and focus on that area? Okay, now I want you to breathe into that area. Okay, breathe into that. And you do these exercises. The whole purpose of it is you do the exercises and afterwards you say, okay, now how do you feel? And they're like, wow, I feel better. So just something as simple as that could literally mean the difference from that person, that kid getting in junior high school and choosing natural modalities over drugs. Because I promise you, they're going to find a way to override that feeling, whether it's either doing X, Y, and Z, taking some sort of substance, or creating a behavior that combats that. Something is going to be, an action is going to be taken. Why not give them the belief that they have the ability to control their state? And I think if we can give them that one message, man, that's what I needed. And I know that's what a lot of kids need now.
I think especially post-pandemic,
Yeah.
I know in very academically competitive, affluent area, and it's even worse here because children feel behind. Like we're all behind. We all lost a year. Like it's okay. Let's just like relax a little bit, right? But when children in this area aren't performing to whatever arbitrary standards exist by wherever they were defined, this stress and anxiety that these children are experiencing because they lost social interaction. They lost so much of the things that are critical to developing young minds at that age, like literally the brain as a teenager needs peers. Like it's the way that the brain is fundamentally developing. And then we literally isolated everyone for so long and then threw them back into the pen. And if we think about how hard it was for us as adults in whatever situation we were in, not a single person that I've ever spoken to was like, the pandemic was great. Everything was, I had a great time, right? Like we all had our own issues. And now I'm thinking about, I have 4 teenagers who all went through that period and are now more anxious, more depressed, more all these things. And they need tools because if they don't have them, not not just are we talking about anxiety and depression, but to your point, there are a lot more high risk things for children at that age. And I do want to talk about some of the really high risk things that are happening. And on top of that, our children have much more stress than we had. Any of us could, even if you were in school 10 years ago, they have more stress than we had when we were in school. And I know for me, we didn't have social media when I was in high school. We didn't have um, rampant school shootings. We didn't have lockdown drills for me to be stressed during the day about, right? Like there's all these things that my children tell me when they come home from school that worry them. And so the idea that you're going into schools and you're teaching these things to children, like I just think that is an incredible thing that I wish that we were teaching. We also don't teach a lot of critical skills that we need to be learning in school, but that's a topic for another day, right? Like, so the idea that there is this opportunity to educate and empower our children, I think is an incredible one.
Yeah, I concur.
What would you suggest to listeners? So I always like to leave people with like actionable, positive suggestions that they can take away today. And they can like, when the podcast is over, say, okay, I'm going to do this one thing and I'm going to know that I'm making a difference in my life. I'm not going to feel overwhelmed by, yeah, I have to go to your site and I have to sign up for the thing and I have to do this and I have to, like, what is one thing that someone could do today after the show and they would be better for it?
Yeah, I would do the sigh. It's so simple, but like if you have that, and then you can have fun with it, right? Like Stacy, what some of the things I'll do is I'll be like, okay, today what I'm going to do is every time I walk through a doorway, I'm going to do a sigh. And then you say, okay, you do that game with yourself. One, you're going to realize how many the doorways you walk through a day, first of all. Second of all, don't be surprised if people look at you and say, "Are you okay?" Because I do that. I'll go down and people are like, "Oh, you okay? Stressful day."
Sure,
But
and I love that you're saying this because it hadn't occurred to me to do it when you're not feeling tension, but just, like, to assign a
yes.
period of like, a random kind of thing and be like, "Okay, that's when I'm gonna do it."
Yeah, like, I would make it a point to, at the bare minimum, do 3 sighs after you hear this podcast, and then if you wanna have fun with it, do a sigh every time you go through a doorway, and I think just feeling the shift from a sigh is gonna get them curious. It's gonna be like, "Wow, I never thought about, like, consciously doing a sigh on purpose. I always just do it when my body does it." And when you do a sigh on purpose consciously for the first time, and that's the first step. That's actionable step. That's easy, tangible that people can do today. And if you like that, then you can go deeper down the rabbit hole and go to an event and try the breathwork detox and stuff. But I'd say start there.
I also am thinking about all the times that I am a heavy sigher, and I'm like, "Yeah, that makes sense," like, all the time. My kids are like, "You okay?" And I'm like, "Yep, I'm fine."
People, it's like strangers will even look at you like, are you okay? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, listeners, I want to remind you, you can follow up with Curtis at breathworkdetox.com, and you have events listed on the webpage. You also provided the code podcast 50. Is that correct? If
Right.
someone
Yes.
did want to check out. Were there other things? I know they can follow you on Instagram at Man from the Stars. Anything else that you want to let listeners know before we say
I'd
goodbye?
say like my 2 books that I wrote, if people wanted to look at those, the children's book is called The Secret of Life. Book 1, Just Breathe. And I usually go into 5th, 6th, 7th graders. It's a little bit older, although 4th grade is okay too. And my adult book, which is How to Thrive in the Age of Anxiety, Breathwork Detox, How to Thrive in the Age of Anxiety. And I think that would be good if people are looking for all the information about the breath in one place. So it really condensed everything for them and put it into one easy read. I just would like to throw those 2 things out there if that interests people as well.
Yeah, I had a whole line of questions to talk about law of attraction and
Oh,
that sort
nice.
of thing because it's another thing that has made a huge difference in my life in terms of like changing my thought patterns and that sort of stuff. So, apologize listeners, we got talking about breath and we didn't get there, but I know that's something that you include in your work and is part of that first book, right?
Yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
to come back on and talk about that because you did mention something in the
Yeah.
email about toxic positivity.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a good conversation.
I think so. Let's do it. So, listeners, Curtis will be back. We don't know when, but we thank you so much for being here today. And I want to remind listeners if you enjoyed the show today, please leave a review. It helps other people find the show. It doesn't cost you anything but a few minutes of your time at the most, but makes a difference in our ability to continue to do the show and have other people find it. Don't forget to follow or subscribe in whatever platform you're listening or watching. And as always, we appreciate your willingness to be open to grow through your own personal changes, but no one is perfect. In listening and learning and unlearning, you can choose to become better versions of ourselves for ourselves and for our children and all of our community, as we've talked about today. So, thank you so much, Curtis, for being here and sharing. And hopefully, you'll be back. We can talk about toxic positivity and laws of attraction and gratitude and mindfulness, things beyond just breath work. But I appreciate your detailed conversation today.
Thank you for having me.